This was my involvement when I was in tall school. I was a persevering understudy and preferred to come to school early within the morning. So at that time, I came exceptionally early, around 6. Really, the circumstance exterior is very shinning, but not in my classroom, which is found within the corner of the building. Well, my seating position is third from the front, and there are still 3 tables behind me. You'll say my position is right within the center of the classroom. As before long as I entered the purge classroom, the cold disgust of the AC quickly entered my coat. Those on picket obligation recently certainly didn't clean up. How did you disregard to turn off the AC? I thought to myself, since I saw that the seats weren't raised on the table either. I strolled to my situate, hung my rucksack following to the table. At that point sat down, whereas playing on my cell phone. Abruptly, my chair was pushed from behind, exceptionally difficult. The thrust wasn't from the table behind me, but from the exceptionally back table. How do I know? Since the thrust was so difficult that 3 tables behind me were pushed as well. In less than a moment, I promptly cleared out the classroom. I'd chosen to fair hold up before the course where I was sitting. By the way, this educator is dead presently, right? The instructor strolled towards the latrine, but I didn't have time to welcome him since I was focused on playing on my cell phone, and he was strolling quick. Goodness yes, to the cleared out of my classroom. There's still one more classroom, then the girls can. In the meantime, the men's latrine is at the other conclusion of the building. I as it were had time to see the back of the instructor when I turned into the girls' can. That's where I felt bizarre. Why did the instructor enter the girls' can? But I didn't truly care. After all, at that time, the school was still calm, and there were no female understudies. There, for around 30 minutes, I was still sitting lovely before the course. Friends had begun to reach, and the climate was not as frightening as some time recently. But I begun to feel interesting since the instructor didn't come out of the can. Amid that time, no one else entered or left the girls' latrine. At long last, out of interest, I went to the can fair to create sure that what I saw was really the educator. And when I entered, there was no one interior. I attempted opening the chambers one by one and no doubt purge. Consequently, I instantly ran back to the class, which was as of now beginning to get active. From a separate, I looked towards the school door where the educator had just arrived on his motorbike. After this occurrence, the next day I came back early once more. As before long as I arrived at school, I'd promptly required to urinate. I'd promptly put the pack on the table and surged to the latrine. I didn't disregard to play an uproarious tune on my cell phone, so that the climate isn't as well calm. You know what happens when somebody is frantic? How can they act? I didn't utilize the brake to enter so the door didn't squeak any longer, but shouted. The point is that it's truly loud where I'm playing melodies at nearly maximum volume. I went into the primary booth, not overlooking to put my cell phone in my shirt take. Fair as I felt the help of letting go of sentiments that had been stifled for so long, the tune ceased, moving to the another track. And in that few seconds of quiet, suddenly, the hairs on the back of my neck bristled. My heart felt like it had halted beating. I listened, a voice right in my ear to my right. I could even feel his breath. Instantly, I realized that it appeared like I was being upbraided for making an object there early in the morning. At that point, I sliced and sprinkled. I automatically ran absent. I was frightened and a small froze. My brain began considering interesting things. I'm anxious that there will be a follow-up occurrence, for illustration, being seen in that frame straightforwardly. But as it were listened from my companions who seen firsthand, when the senior was had that morning after the hail ceremony. I was still hanging out within the campaign of the junior tall school building with 1 to 2 companions. Most of the understudies, particularly upperclassmen, have returned to the high school building. Gracious yes, we held the ceremony in the center school stopping part since at that time, the tall school building was being remodeled. So the tall school yard space was not sufficient to suit classes 10 to 12. When the stopping parcel started to get calm, we taken after back to the high school building. But apparently, there was still a swarm at the tall school entryway. I saw a female understudy being carried into the UKS. I naturally inquired the other children who were there. Then they replied. They said somebody was had. Not fulfilled with that reply. When we arrived at course, we were excited to ask each other questions and share data. A friend of mine who happens to be near to an upperclassman told me. He said amid the ceremony, he was within the back push. So it was simple for him to sneak out with his companions when the ceremony was not wrapped up. She and her companion went back to the tall school building to begin with. Let's call them Au and Bella. Au was had. Bella, who told her friend, and her companion Bella, who told my companion. Their lesson is found on the second floor of the ancient building at the cleared-out conclusion, whereas the toilet is at the proper conclusion of the building. When they were in course, I said to Bella that she needed to go to the latrine, but Bella was feeling apathetic, so she didn't want to go with Au. I went to the toilet alone. Not long after cleared out, Bella all of a sudden felt frantic as well. So she had long last taken after A to the latrine. Fair strolling past one classroom, Bella saw her come out of the can screaming hysterically. She ran quick towards Bella. Bella inquired what was off base, but it looked so frail she was approximately to faint. So they went back to lesson after being given a drink to begin with and completely cognizant. Au told me that as before long as she came out of the can work area, suddenly in front of her, there was an excellent young lady, blue eyes, blonde hair, wearing an impoverished dress, fair standing before her. Au was stunned and had a freeze assault. She instantly ran away from there. She said she felt like she had entered the figure's body, but she couldn't think approximately anything any longer. After wrapping up telling Bella, I blacked out and became oblivious. Fortunately, the children had already returned from the ceremony. Those who didn't know at first thought I had blacked out since she was powerless after the ceremony. So they rubbed eucalyptus oil beneath her nose. I woke up once more, but was crying, and after that snickering. The confused children at long last told Bella, after which I blacked out once more. The children were active carrying A to the UKS on the primary floor. Well, I too listened rumors that there were other understudies who were had. Not fair Au, but since I didn't see it myself, I'm not beyond any doubt in case it is true or just prattle. Affirm, that's all for now. I'll continue with the frightfulness encounter when I took portion within the OIS administration determination where there was a sleepover occasion at school, on the off chance that that's what you're interested. In this happened when I was in Review 3 of professional school. At that time, my companions from my lesson were getting a charge out of playing trance. Long story brief, there's one of my companions who is exceptionally simple to hypnotize, and until my companion was had by a soul named Shinta. I fair snickered when I listened it. I thought it was a story spice that didn't have to be bethought as well much around. And it felt like at that time, I too didn't accept it since attempt to suppose, when my companion was had. He didn't shout like a had individual but instep, he need to know other companions and chat as normal until it was break time. Let's call my companion who was had individual. I passed before my lesson with a clear confront and was taken after by a few of my other companions. After that, not distant from the front of my lesson, I halted there. Another companion of mine said today, "We do not like you here. We need as soul back." And after that they turned to my companion with a C that I thought was super sharp at my companion who inquired, and instantly my companion blacked out and affair remained noiseless. It's insane, I thought at that time. What kind of control it was that when I looked at it, I immediately blacked out. At that time, I felt it was truly terrifying since it happened sometime recently my eyes. A couple of days after that occurrence, I happened to need to go road vendors to a city. I needed to be a road drinking spree in that city, particularly in a plant. Long story brief, my group of road drinking sprees and I concurred to go together and assemble to begin with at school. When I arrived there was as it were one companion. Let's call him R. At that time, I inquired him to go with me into the school to induce the project protective cap that we would wear afterward amid our road sellers. Within the classroom lockers, at that time, I'd purposely remain behind so that it wouldn't be a bother when I cleared out. After getting consent from the security watch, and I entered the course. But sometime recently entering the course, and I saw a lady strolling towards us at that point turn to the back entryway of the school. And I were inquisitive whether it was one of our companions or not, since the school was calm and dull at that time. As it were a number of minutes after the lady, she looked like she was wearing a long skirt, turned to the back of the school. And I instantly taken after her. The purposeful was to say hi. Who knew he can be a companion of our bunch or another bunch who had moreover concurred at school to go to street vendors that night. And how astounded and I was since when and I turned the corner. He wasn't there, and the back entryway of the school was bolted tight. Where he is, I do not know either. And I just looked at each other, then grabbed each other's hands and turned around. Went into course, took our protective caps, and rushed back to the school entryway. Arriving at the school entryway and holding up not as well long at last, my two other companions arrived, as well as the car that we would utilize to go to the street vendors. Within the car, my two companions, let's call them I and O, had a really energizing story, almost a who was had by Shinta. And I fair looked at each other without joining in, perplexed it would include to the frightfulness of their story. Long story short, I can't accept it. My three companions and I have been at the road sellers for more than a month. We felt at domestic and felt happy because apart from getting to know numerous modern people, we too traveled to numerous places. Until one day, one of my friends, I was taking a shower, called one of us to go with him exterior the lavatory, since he said he listened the sound of a lady wailing. At that time, we were befuddled who was crying. At that point, not long after, W2 experienced the same thing, and we begun to stress who it is. Then after that occurrence, numerous interesting things happened to the people around me in the boarding house and plant environment. I will say them one by one. Firstly, when I bought ice at a road vendor's customary put with R and the other I and W, the dealer said, "How come you only purchase 4? You more often than not purchase 5. I'm surprised. This is the first time we've bought it employing a store frameworks, since as a rule the road merchants come domestic and purchase it themselves. And clearly, there were as it were 4 of us, not 5 at that time. Maybe the dealer was fair feeling apathetic. Besides, one day we went to the production line canteen and felt bored with the nourishment. The menu was continuously the same every week. At last, we concurred to require 2 pieces of rice, which we would eat together, and 2 pieces of drain and bread, which the 4 of us would too share. Since as a rule we collected ourselves, this time we only sent one individual to gather 4 coupons for the 4 of us. And yes, just like the caps and dealer, the coupon officer moreover said, "How come it's as it were 4? Usually it's 5. Who knows who the other one is?" Indeed, in spite of the fact that we had clarified that there were as it were 4 of us, the canteen staff were befuddled until they inquired each other. Thirdly, one time I didn't go to the plant. He was sick. And yes, when we arrived at the office, many employees inquired where our other companion was. And we replied that he was wiped out. And the normal reaction was, "Gracious, it's fitting for fair the 4 of us. There ought to as it were be 3. 3 of us, not 4. And unusually, it wasn't fair one worker who said that, but many." Fourthly, when I was on the phone in front of our boarding house, my companion instantly told me to come in. Though he said there was a woman in a white dress in front of me, I got goosebumps. Not as it were me, but moreover the 4 of us. Fifthly, every night I continuously wake up to go to the washroom, and I regularly listen the sound of the piano. One day, I woke up my companion to listen the piano. He too listened it, which means I'm not shy. After that, I inquired the kids hanging out who preferred to remain up late near the boarding house. And they said, No one had a piano around there, and they had never listened of anything. Who knows, Keenan, the landlady's grandson, who was 3 a long time ancient at the time and frequently played in our room, abruptly said, "T, where does T like to sit here?" He pointed to the corner of the room behind the door. We thought he had overlooked our names, and we pointed to each of us to see on the off chance that he implied the 4 of us. He said it wasn't us, but a lady he called T-sister and child Denise sitting within the corner. And presently he's not there. Who's he? Who knows? Seventhly, when we were eating beside the landlord, she and her sister said that when we came, she and her sister thought there were 5 of us. After he affirmed it, it turned out there were as it were 4 of us. How strange. Well, this was the final occurrence. The day sometime recently we went home, there was a gentleman passing by our room. "Consent to go to the washroom," he said. Our room was near to the lavatory of the house. At that point he, the honorable man, detailed to our landlord that she said we appeared to be an inconvenience since we listened crying from interior our room. And when he looked in, he said one of us was crying and stroking my hair. At that time, we were instantly called by the proprietor to inquire in the event that there was an issue or how we were crying so much. We were confounded since among the 4 of us, no one indeed cried. We were exceptionally upbeat to go domestic after 3 months of road merchants in other people's cities. Who is he that has been confounding us all this time? In our conclusion, he has been taking after us from school to road sellers. And when we arrived at school once more, we went domestic, and none of us were aggravated once more. Everybody is secure taking off one address. Who is? This occurrence happened around 1988, when at that time I was still in Review 2 of rudimentary school in one of the towns within the area. My school is the most seasoned school in my town. The dividers are made of ancient wood, and the floor is still soil. The seats and tables are still ancient models. The school was built amid the Dutch colonial time, and the remove between the school and my house is as it were around 150 meters. All my family, beginning from my grandma, are graduated class at this basic school. That evening, I overlooked the day and date. We went through the regular school schedule of playing with classmates, when break came and tuning in to the teacher's lessons, whereas in course CL. After the moment break or the final break of the day, we were all stunned by a shout that was so uproarious that we didn't, however, know the source of the sound. All the understudies and instructors hurried out into the schoolyard to discover out what was going on, but we all looked at each other and didn't see anything on the street. There were no mischances or anything like that. But not long after that, the sound of shouts was listened once more, taken after by an uproarious effect on one of the wooden furniture. All the understudies and teachers spread around the school searching for the source of the sound. A sports instructor found the source of the sound within the toilet, which was found within the back corner of the school close exceptionally thick bamboo and teak trees. There was a delicate sound of crying from interior the can, but the sports instructor called no reply. It didn't take long for the latrine entryway to be pushed open from the exterior. The entryway opened, all the instructors, there were dazed to see my senior lying limp on the messy, sloppy, and malodorous latrine floor. At that point, the child was lifted and taken to the UK's room to have his body cleaned. The story of the occurrence at school that I saw closes here. The another one is based on the story of my sports educator who went with my seniors. After having his body cleaned, my senior was taken to the community well-being center, which isn't distant from our school. Approximately 2 hours afterward, my senior was alluded to the common healing center in my city, which is around 20 kilometers absent. When he got there, he was unconscious until evening. All his family gathered to hold up for him at the healing center. Around 1 in the morning, this child woke up from his obviousness. The interesting thing that his family felt was that this child inquired for a glass of coffee indeed, in spite of the fact that he had never inebriated coffee some time recently. The coffee was served. He as it were drank a small. His eyes were clear for a couple of minutes. No words came out of his mouth. At that point, he chuckled to himself and inquired his father, "Where am I, sir?" His father replied, "You're being treated at the clinic. You fell at school." "I didn't drop at school. I was playing at my unused house," replied the child. "My house is little but exceptionally cool. There are bamboo trees and teak trees. I was playing with a really huge doll. My doll, as it were, incorporates a head. It has teeth, long white hair. The doll's head is on the floor." When he was telling the story, this child every so often stuck out his tongue, and his eyes bulged, observing everybody within the healing center room, including my sports teacher who was sitting next to his bed. The climate got to be tense when abruptly this child shouted uproariously within the center of a quiet night, where within the clinic numerous of the patients being treated there were snoozing. Immediately, the air got to be loud. Guests and other understanding family members jarred to see where my senior was being treated. This child at that point got to be oblivious once more. In the blink of an eye after he shouted uproariously, his body limp lying on the bed. All his family individuals were worried that something awful would happen until at last at around 9:00 a.m., my senior was pronounced dead. The school got in the news and all the students were sent domestic early. All the instructors went to the memorial service domestic, and the following day all the occasions at the clinic were told by our sports educator within the schoolyard. Until presently, what I do not get it is what caused my senior's passing. He woke up briefly only to tell me terrible things, and after that cleared out until the end of time. This is often a frightening occurrence that happened at my Think About place. Thanks for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe the channel Midnight Mysteria and share this video with your friend who liked the scary videos, and comment down your favorite story.